I was a skinny little 12-year-old, right? And the scuba instructor was this old Navy diver, the tattoos, big, gruff guy. And he was really intense on teaching us how to, not only the technical parts of how to scuba dive, but how not to panic and think through problems underwater when they happen. This salty water at depth and this cold water just hits you and it just sucks the air out of you. And that's the first test to see if you panic, because that panic instinct comes right to you because we're land-based animals and your body's telling you you're underwater. This is not good.
Hi, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you here because you are not an average, everyday of the mill leadership coach. You have traveled to some of the most remotest and wildest places on earth, experienced amazing things. When you look back at your life, if you had to tell a story, maybe a specific moment from your adventures, it really impacted your perspective on leadership or resilience, which one would it be?
It would be the story of the old Navy diver who taught me how to scuba dive. And I didn't really know it at the time, but I've come to know what he gave me as he was teaching me. And let me set the frame. I was a skinny little 12-year-old, right? Pretty unremarkable, not particularly athletic. And I was begging my parents to allow me to take scuba lessons. And for some reason, they said yes. And the scuba instructor was this old Navy diver. And just the name, if you picture what an old Navy diver would look like, it was him. The tattoos, big, gruff guy. And he was really intense on teaching us how to, not only the technical parts of how to scuba dive, but how not to panic and think through problems underwater when they happen. For instance, when we'd be practicing in the pool, some particular technique, he would swim up behind you and then turn off air to see how you would react. Do little things like that to mess with you, to teach you that things happen that you don't expect, but you have to calmly work through the problem and figure it out. Because when you're scuba diving, especially as you go deeper and deeper, bad things can happen. So you have to be able to calmly work through the problem. And his checkout dive was actually very smart. So we go out on the checkout dive and the water's really cold. And we're off the coast of California. We're going to go down and go through some kelp beds. So what he had us do is once we got down, he had us take off our face mask. So you have to look through this salty water at depth and this cold water just hits you and it just sucks the air out of you. And that's the first test to see if you panic, because that panic instinct comes right to you because we're land-based animals and your body's telling you you're underwater. This is not good. So you had to remain calm. And then without a mask, we had to follow him through the kelp bed. And a kelp bed is basically an underwater forest. So imagine looking in the ocean at depth, no mask, in the salt water, and having to follow him through this kelp bed. So that was the second test. Could you do it? Could you work through the problem and not panic? And the skinny little kid passed. And so we come back up onto the beach and we're taking off the gear, and the gear weighed as much as I did. And when he was down there, he had knocked off some rock scalps. And the small group that had survived this course so far was getting, undressed and off gear. But he weighed me over and he was washing the scallops in this little sink. And he cracked one open and then he handed it to me, this raw scallop. And he looked at me and said, "Kid, I never thought you'd make it." And he handed me the scallop, and it was a rite of passage to eat this raw scallop. And to that skinny kid, I don't know if you can tell, right? I still get goosebumps telling the story because it was so impactful to me as that little kid. But what I didn't fully realize is those lessons that he taught me at the time began my path to being far more resilient. And the wisdom and the ideas that he gave me of anticipating problems and risk management and working through the problems. Even at 12 years old, I didn't understand it. But as I've gone through more and more adventures, it served me well. In climbing school, they were more formal about risk management and anticipating problems. But it all started with that big old gruff Navy diver and that skinny little kid and a raw scallop. And from there, it's just allowed, people ask me about resilience, and it's not like a switch you can flip. Resilience is earned. It's a path that you have to take. So what I try and tell people is you have to keep challenging yourself, but you have to have the mindset to understand what does it mean to be resilient. I do a podcast, Whiskey and a Map, where I interview explorers and adventurers, and we're in the 5th season. And as I was interviewing these people, a lot of us had the same question of, okay, why do we do these crazy, silly, stupid things that put our life at risk for no real pecuniary gain? You're climbing a mountain that could kill you. You're going into a jungle with things that want to eat you. But that kind of led me also to trying to understand what makes a good adventure explorer. What separates these people that I was interviewing, people who go into deep jungles or climb high mountains or dive deep and come back and be able to tell the story, as opposed to those who died in the attempt or failed? And certain patterns come out. And it's funny because that Navy diver had it all when he was that 12-year-old kid. And so as I try and teach people, is that mindset of an explorer, of an adventurer, what is it and how they can use it in their own lives to be resilient in the sense of being calm in a crisis and making calm, cool decisions so that you can work the problem. And in my world, not die. But in a business world, if you make a bad decision in a critical time, the project could be lost. Your business could go under. It's the death of a dream. So that's the pathway.
It's fascinating, right? Because, like you said, in your world, the consequences are life and death. Not to downplay the consequences of the business world. Sure, their lives are at stake because, in the sense that businesses go down, people lose their jobs. Still not as critical as one's literal life being at stake. When we talk about decision making and we talk about staying calm under pressure, it almost has become a cliche in our society. It's just something people say, oh, don't worry about it, don't stress about it, stay calm, stay cool. What does it really mean? What are some strategies that you would say that one can utilize to actually put meaning into those cliche statements?
Let's start with what happens in a crisis situation: acute stress. I've done research on it, and there's all sorts of very academic definitions. But really what happens is something unexpected happens that has a bad consequence if you don't do it. That's what causes you stress. Let's just keep it simple. When that stress hits you, our reptilian brain kicks in, our vision gets narrow, you're in fight or flight, you're not really thinking clearly because all your reptilian brain is thinking, I don't want to be eaten and I want to get out of danger zone. Instead of your heart's beating, your adrenaline's pumping, all these things that just cloud your ability to make calm, clear, good decisions at exactly the wrong time that you really need to be calm, clear, cool, and make the right decisions. Now, in the jungles, when, 200,000 years ago, it served us well because it got us up and running, and hopefully the tiger didn't need us. But in our world today, we're not running from the tiger, but the body's still reacting. So how do you keep that or mitigate that from happening so that you're not in the panic mode and you can clearly think? Because that's really what you wanted, is you want to cut down that stress reaction and then clearly think about what you're doing. So that's the physical problem that you're dealing with. So when the people say, just be calm and cool, well, what does that mean? It means mitigating that stress reaction. And my world of adventurers and explorers, we seek out the unknown. So if you're sitting on the edge of a jungle and you're looking in there, and there are known issues that you're going to have to deal with, medical issues and so forth, but there's the unknown, and that's why you're going there. But with that unknown comes unknown challenges, unknown threats to the success of the project, unknown threats to your physical safety. That's the adventure. And so explorers and adventurers start out and have developed that mindset that they know that unknown threats are going to happen. And so that's the first thing when they go in. When it does happen, it takes that unexpected part of the stress reaction out of the equation. It's not unexpected. It's, okay, I knew something was going to happen. Here we are. Now we got to deal with it. Doesn't mean that there's not that initial reaction when something bad happens, but is the degree of your reaction. So if you're already anticipating something bad is going to happen, not in a dark, pessimistic way, but this is your job. You understand something bad is going to happen and threaten your project. When it comes, you're not nearly as surprised. Your stress reaction is way down. And so that is first and foremost the key to a successful leader of an expedition. That's their job. They know these unknowns are coming. They know these unknowns or threats are there. And they know that's my job is when it happens, understand it's going to happen and let's work the problem. That makes sense?
Is there just an anticipation of something bad is going to happen and I need to be ready for it? Or is there also some type of a worst case scenario planning associated with it?
Good question. It's because that gets to the next step. And it's just the anticipation is more an expectation that we know something's bad going to happen. We just don't know what. And it may be a number of things. And that's why we're there as the adventurer. But that takes you're spot on, because that naturally then makes you think, okay, risk management. These are all the risks that are out there. How do I mitigate the risks? And to a person, every successful explorer and adventurer I spoke to, they are meticulous about risk management because they know with this mindset, they understand that if you screw up, somebody may be injured on your team or somebody may die. And so that really focuses you in on what are my risks and how do I mitigate those? In climbing school, when we were going through that, they made it real simple. They say to analyze your risk, it's the risk of fall versus the consequence of fall. So if the risk of fall is small, but the consequence is you're going for a 3,000-foot drop, that's a high risk situation. And so you have to mitigate that risk. And in climbing, this way you mitigate it with what they call protection, where you put in anchors and ropes and that sort of thing. But yes, that mindset all of a sudden focuses you on risk mitigation. And what do I need to know? What do I need to find out? West Hansen is a great example of this. He, from source to sea, the Amazon, and West read everything he could about anybody who ever traveled down the Amazon in this situation. He called up people who had been kayaking certain sections. He ran down people who nobody ever heard of, but he just sought them out, read books, everything. He talked to people to get as much information as he could about what lay ahead. And he was successful. And with all the dangers, both natural and man-made, because he had to go through some sketchy places when he was going through the Amazon with drug runners and so forth. But he was prepared because he had engaged in that risk management. What's going to happen? Now, things unexpected happened, but because of all the processes that he'd done, all the research he had done, it wasn't so far out of his comfort zone, out of his preparations, that he couldn't deal with it. And that's, again, so with that expanded view that bad things are going to happen, you have this much more meticulous risk management. So when the unexpected does happen, it's not so far out of what you prepared for. And therefore, that stress reaction is not nearly as acute.
You mentioned your podcast, Whiskey in the Map, and it's in season 5. You're interviewing adventurers, explorers, world-class level people who are literally on a daily basis putting their lives in danger, doing all these things you're talking about, risk management and understanding how to react under stress and all these things that really creates a world-class adventurer. When you reflect upon those interviews, what is one thing that sticks out in your mind as a conversation with somebody who said something that changed the way you thought about things? Because someone who's been doing this for very long, you can get used to that word. And once in a while, someone comes along and says something like, I never thought about it that way. Is there something that sticks out in your mind like that?
Yeah, it's Cyril Deramo. He, Frenchman, now U.S. citizen, and he wanted to kayak from California by himself to Hawaii. And Sir spent a number of years preparing, right? He was anticipating the risks. He was taking classes for rescue and all the other things he needed to do. He's physically preparing. And he was even speaking to this guy down in New Zealand who had done this type of kayaking. So he had a good mentor to her. So he's doing everything textbook that he should be doing. Had a specially built kayak to do it, doing all of his homework, everything that you would think a good explorer should do, a good adventurer. And he sets out, and within a few days, he gets hit by a nasty storm, and it's rocking his kayak back and forth. And he throws out the boat anchor, which is supposed to align the kayak with the waves so he just can ride out the storm. It failed, it got tangled up, and he could have jumped in the water and untangled it, but he didn't make that decision. And eventually he called for a rescue and had to be rescued by the Coast Guard. So when he comes back out, two things happened. A couple of days later, he hired a boat, went out, found his kayak. Kayak was perfectly fine. It had ridden out the storm, no problem, just like it was designed to. But then he had the conversation with the mentor, and he was telling about what happened. Says, yeah, this happened. I was really prepared. So I had my rescue protocol protocol's all done. And then his mentor interrupts him and goes, but Cyril, were you prepared? And Cyril goes, yeah, I was prepared. I was doing this, I was doing that. And I did everything right. I got rescued perfectly well, and et cetera, et cetera. And the mentor again goes, were you prepared? And Cyril paused and he goes, I guess I wasn't. And what happened, there was a mind shift that he understood that it was his issue was commitment, in that with all the preparations, the last of it was, how committed are you to see the project through? And he realized that his commitment level wasn't enough for this level of a project to be successful. And so he doubled down on all the training that he needed to do, but it was really a mind shift in his head as to, okay, I got to pick up my commitment, get this done. And he set out a second time, and he's farther out into the Pacific and got hit by a really nasty storm. But he said he wasn't nearly as scared because he, by that time, had the commitment of, I'm risking death. I will die in order to accomplish this task. But he wasn't suicidal. He wasn't going to say do or die, but it was that level of commitment that he's going to do everything up to and beyond that risk. And he did it by himself. He kayaked all the way from California to Hawaii. A remarkable accomplishment with dealing with the storms and everything else. That really struck me as that was the final ingredient, I think, that makes a successful explorer, the resilient leader, is the anticipation, expecting those problems to happen, ruthlessly engaging in that risk management. But lastly, it's that commitment that focuses you and gives you that energy to see it through, to work the problem and not quit.
It blew your mind when you were having this conversation. It's blowing my mind as I'm listening to it, and audiences as well. The commitment to see the project through. And I'm thinking this live in terms of my endeavors, and I have to now sit and evaluate the times when I didn't succeed. Was I really truly committed enough? The first thing that sticks out in my mind is it's so easy to talk ourselves out of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
There is always a logical reason not to do something. Even if it's something like, I want to lose weight. Is it really that needed? Maybe go easy. Like, why are you working so hard at your job to get promoted? Yeah, but is money really everything in life? Don't you want to have balance? It's always like this yin and yang. We talk ourselves out of stuff, right? Which sometimes makes it so difficult to commit to something. Michael, in all reality, these things that we're talking about, losing weight, there's a personal impact. Making money, there's a personal impact. And we talk ourselves out of it, even though it's truly necessary. Nobody needs to kayak across the ocean. There is truly never a need to it. So how does one commit to something that is not needed? And if we can learn from that, we can apply that on the things that are affecting everybody's life. How do you build that commitment towards something?
For him, it was his dream. It was take an entrepreneur who has a dream of building a company because of an invention they have, and they truly believe in that. And that's their baby. That's their dream. And they want to make that come true. For Cyril, that was his dream. His dream was to be able to do that accomplishment, to be able to test himself across thousands of miles of open ocean by himself in a kayak. That was his dream. And there is a real difference between the entrepreneur who's seeking that dream, that goal of creating that business, or Cyril making it to Hawaii. It's you have to commit to that dream that you have. And how you get there is when you're starting out on that project, things are going to happen. So I got to do my risk management. And when things that I don't know about happen, I'm committed to this project. I'm not going to panic. And again, that keeps that stress level down. The more you're committed to the success of the project, the less that stress reaction comes in, because nothing's going to stop you. You go quickly from panic mode to work the problem mode, because I'm not letting anything stop me from getting to where I want to go. It'd be in Cambodia last year. We were hiking through the jungle, and it was just murderous conditions in that it was high heat, high humidity, thick jungle. I'm no Superman. I was a hurting puppy. But that little voice says, hey, your friends are back at that nice resort hotel sipping Mai Tais by the pool. What the heck are you doing out here? But then you quiet that voice because you're committed to seeing it through. And just like the entrepreneur that gets those first sales and that affirmation that somebody wants what he's giving, like Cyril, when he finally paddled into the harbor there in Hawaii, you pay the price. Be it high humidity, long working hours, long stretches out in the ocean. You pay the price that most people won't pay, but you get to see stuff or experience things that nobody else will. When I go climbing, it's hard. it's hard to take yourself up these mountains. You get to see things that few people get to see. And it's just the experience of seeing this vast horizon that's laid out for you. Or when I was in the jungle, it's the little things too. We were sitting by the river, and our Cambodian guys, the tribal guys that were with us, we couldn't speak to each other. I was learning Cambodian, but these were tribal people, so their language wasn't even Cambodian. But we got to sit down by this little creek, and they pulled out this plastic bottle that you get water in. They brought some homemade wine, rice wine, right? And the three of us, we just sat down, smiled, and shared this homemade rice wine out of this bottle near this river in the middle of the jungle. So it's those things that make it worthwhile. That's why I got to quiet that voice that keeps telling you, this is silly, this is crazy, it's too hard. I could be sitting by a pool somewhere, but then you miss those things.
It just really ties into the idea of distractions. You talked about, I was hiking and I was a herding puppy. And if you're a herding puppy, I don't know what I am. So that's a whole different story. But you're herding puppy, for a moment, you're thinking, I could be at the hotel with my friends relaxing. And almost always we look at champions like yourself. We look at people who have experienced amazing things and we think, oh, it would be wonderful if I could do that. But almost no one ever considers the sacrifices that are being made on a daily basis to be able to live that life. So when you're thinking about your life, when you're thinking about the accomplishments and the amazing things you've experienced, as rewarding as they are and how they have shaped you to be the person you are, what are some of the biggest sacrifices that you have to make to be this version of yourself?
Getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going for a run in the rain. It's those type of sacrifices where people are going to a party, but you've got training to do. Or I'm the latest net series that everybody's talking about because I'm working on another project. I don't see those as sacrifices. It's the choices that I'm making because of where I want to go. It's not so much sacrifices as like, okay, it's a penalty. I'm giving something up. But see, I don't see it that way. It wasn't that important to me anyways, because what I wanted to accomplish requires a certain level of skill, requires a certain level of physicality, requires a whole lot of gathering intelligence about what you're doing. And you need to do it. So if you're committed, if you're going to do this with those kind of risks, it's not a sacrifice. It's what I want to do. I guess it's lifestyle perhaps is better. It'd probably be more noble or whatever heroic if I say, oh, I was sacrificing all of this and that. But it's the choices you make on how you want to spend your time.
100% truth to that, right? The life of an adventurer, in some ways, maybe even the life of an entrepreneur, it's different than the regular life of a person. Right?
Exactly. You're in your business and you're a very successful entrepreneur, but it's a lifestyle, right? There are choices you're making instead of going out to some silly party or whatever that has nothing, not too interesting. I mean, you got to take care of family and everything, but it's a lifestyle because you enjoy it, because you have that commitment to seeing that your dream comes true, whatever that dream is. And so when you have that commitment and you have that dream that really sparks you up, these are really not sacrifices, it's opportunities. And you need to relish the time that you get to be on that journey. One thing you said about too, one thing people should always know is that we see all these heroes on the media where they've accomplished this, they've climbed this mountain, or they've made this touchdown, or they've doing all these spectacular things. A couple of things. One, it seems like they just burst onto the scene and they were just naturally there. That's not true. They've been working at it for 20, 30 years. And also, just like you and me, just regular humans, all these folks, they have that voice in the back of their head that's always talking to them about, you don't need to work out. So you put in enough time today, you can make those sales calls tomorrow. Everyone deals with that little voice in the back of their head that's always telling them to do that. But it's how you react to it. You just got to tell that voice, no, we got more important things to do.
I guess that's where the mental resilience and the mental strength comes into play. The path of a leader, right? It's a lonely path by definition, right? And as much determination as one may have as an entrepreneur, as an adventurer, and as a leader in an organization, it's almost like with every new level one conquers, sometimes the lonelier it gets.
Oh, absolutely.
And when we talk about the voices in our head, that is another thing that almost pulls us out of it. So what is the strategy to fight that? Or at least survive that? Because as human beings, we're meant to be together. We're not meant to feel lonely all the time.
First of all, it's like you say, it's a path. You don't climb Everest on the first day that you start climbing. You start out in the small mountains, you go to mountaineering school, you climb progressively harder and harder mountains so that you gain the skill sets and the experience that allows you to, even as a leader, take on bigger and bigger tasks, bigger projects. So it's a path. It's not like I say, a switch that you can turn, and few, if anybody, is born with it. It is the path. But at each level, yeah, there's people that you may be not associating with so much before, but as you get to that next level, you'll look around and there's still people there. There may not be as many, but they're damn interesting. And you have to seek them out and covet those relationships, cultivate those relationships. And some of those get pretty strong because if you've suffered, sacrificed, worked yourself so hard to get to this level, made that commitment, those folks did just the same, and they're kindred spirits. And it's not so much that you're lonely from leaving those other people behind. You find people that probably understand you a whole lot better than your older friends. And yeah, there may not be as many, but let's you and I look right now with we have an understanding of what it takes to get to those hard goals. It's just to look from somebody who's on that same path and about the same process. You can look at each other and go, yeah, it's just a knowing glance, and it is pretty cool. We are social creatures, but I don't think the sacrifice is that much if you're open to it and understand that there are fellow travelers out there, and seek them out because it's pretty cool, some of the stories they have.
When you're talking about commitment and asking yourself, am I truly committed to this? When you're talking about risk management and you're saying, am I truly prepared for the risk versus the consequence? When you're talking about, is this really my dream? Am I really willing to go all the way through? The connecting element through all of this is extreme honesty, something that is at a premium these days. Tell us a little bit about that. How does one cultivate that in an environment where it's so much easier to believe that I'm not able to do something just because I wasn't born that way or wasn't made that way, or maybe I had some handicap? How does one cultivate that?
It's more, for a while I was doing adventure racing. And in adventure racing, you're on a team, you're going for days and days, nonstop racing, and you're in charge of your own navigation. And the race directors are diabolical because they try and get you to be lost because it really impacts team dynamics. And there's a great picture that I remember from a eco challenge where it shows this powerful team and they're just powering up this mountain. They're just studs. They're super fit and they're just powering up this mountain. Unfortunately, it was the wrong mountain. And I just felt so bad for those folks. But there was a lesson there, is that you got to make sure it's the right mountain for you. And you're in charge of your own navigation. And so before you climb, before you commit, yeah, you have to do some soul searching. Is this the right mountain for me? And I think there's some ingredients to try and understand what the right mountain is for a person. And that is, it has to have risk, because without risk, there's no a sense of accomplishment. It's got to require effort. If it's too easy, you're not going to really have any positive, great feelings that are going to last. And you have to know yourself. It's got to be something that sparks your soul. And if you put those three ingredients together, you're likely going to be climbing the right mountain. So that's something that I've come to learn and appreciate more, is make sure you're climbing the right mountain. But once you do, climb it. And sometimes you have false summits. Sometimes you thought something was going to be what it was and it wasn't. That's okay. You've learned, and you've learned a whole lot more about yourself. And the next mountain you pick is, you're probably going to get much closer to it, that sparks you up and is a worthwhile project to be that committed to getting it done.
You have explored so many cultures. And in today's world where we are more divided than we ever have been, despite the technology that's supposedly supposed to bring us together, having experienced these cultures, having experienced these continents, having experienced these historical mysteries and the ancient rituals, when we talk about human resilience, when we talked about ability, how do you find them different among cultures, and how do you find them similar across cultures?
It's the similarity that really strikes you, be it a tribal village in Cambodia or a small village like Baruti in Kenya, or in Guatemala, where I did some work. There are threads there where you see people who are living literally in small huts, wood, dirt floor. They cook over an open campfire, and they're happy. They're content. Now, I'm sure they would like to have all the modern conveniences, but it's not as if they're just sitting around feeling sorry for themselves. They make it work. Their lifestyles are fine. There's a community. They speak with each other. They're laughing. They're joking. And probably in that is what we're missing in like modern society as we see it with everybody being divided is it's too noisy for us. If you walk into those small villages, it's quiet. When you walk through, nobody's constantly looking at their phone instead of each other. As you walk through those villages, people stop and talk to each other, make sure everybody's good. And so it's that sense of community that is just blown away, especially in the past decade or two with the burst of social media and the burst of cell phones and the attention society and economy that has to where everybody's trying to grab your attention for stuff that doesn't matter. And it gets in a perverse way, that attention, the reason why people look at a car accident as they go by, you can't stop. These people with the attention economy have figured that out, the algorithms. So they give us car crashes all the time, car crashes. And so we're inundated with that. And no wonder everybody's depressed and angry and divided because you get all this crazy stuff. But if you go back to those villages, it's not like that. It's not perfect in any fashion, but you can see the difference. And I think we need to recognize the loss that we have going into this cell phone induced microsecond reels attention economy. That's probably the biggest lesson that I remind myself and I learn and relearn by going to these places is what we've lost by doing this hyper technology.
Michael, in a world where there are so many crashing waves making so many loud noises and a spectacle, we forget that the real strength of the ocean is in the middle of the ocean where the water is quiet and it runs deep. When I speak to you, that's what I feel. That's the energy I feel. The experiences that you have had, the lessons that you have learned, not through just living your life, but also sharing it with other adventurers and explorers. That lesson just cannot be learned by reading a book. So I am so happy that you are able to be in a position in life where you can transfer some of those knowledge and those skills into a corporate environment for a employee, a leader, or even an entrepreneur, because these lessons will never be learned otherwise. So thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for allowing us to get peek into the mind of someone who is literally risking their life on a daily basis to achieve a dream that they had a long time ago. What are some last words you have for our audience members to help them embark on some adventurous, high risk, high pressure venture that maybe they have been wanting to do for a while, but they never got brave enough to do it?
The easiest, best advice is step out the door, take the first step. Don't need to climb the highest mountain that you see the first day, but take that first step towards that dream that you want to have. Be it some people have always wanted to dance, but they never danced. Walk out the door, go to a dance studio. You'll thank yourself because it speaks to your soul. There's musicians out there who are not playing an instrument because they've let inertia stop them. Step out the door, go to the music store, take lessons, take up an instrument. If walk out into the woods and just start experiencing it. It just starts with that step. And what you'll find is once you've broken through that inertia that binds you down to the couch, it's freeing. But it's simple to do. You just got to do it. You just got to step out that door and pursue the dream, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be the brain damage stuff that I do. Hopefully more people will be a lot more sensible than that. But yeah, it's always the first step.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. I hope we can talk soon again.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.